So, good morning, everyone. We have to start from page 101, third paragraph. I hope all of you remember what happened till now in this story. Klausner was busy trying to make something, and there was a box which looked like a black box which looked like a coffin, right? And he was trying to do something. He was completely absorbed doing something, trying to fix the wires and everything inside that box. And who comes to visit him? Dr. Scott. So Dr. Scott comes to visit him and just to inquire because he was passing that way, and so he came to inquire about his health. And when he saw that box and all the things which were there inside that shed, he became very curious to know about it, curious to know more about that particular thing, that coffin shaped box, right? So now we'll move further. Before we move further, I want to ask you that what do you like? You have read a little about Dr. Scott and you have read a little about Klausner also. So what can you tell about Dr. Scott? From the conversation between Klausner and Dr. Scott, we can say that he was a very cooperative, very considerate, and a very compassionate person. Right? He just came to Klausner's house to inquire about his health because earlier he must have been suffering from cold. Right? So he just wanted to know how he is. So what does this show? That he is very compassionate towards his friends. Right? And he is like, he considers Klausner to be one of his close friends. Right? A doctor doesn't pay his visit to all the people's houses, all his patients. So he went to Klausner's house because he was like, he felt himself to be very attached to Klausner. Right? So that is why he went to his house. Klausner looked down at the box. So we did till here where he expressed Dr. Scott expressed his curiosity to know about what was actually happening, what Klausner was actually doing. Klausner looked down at the box, then at the doctor, and he reached up and began gently to scratch the lobe of his right ear. Lobe, you know, lobe is that this hanging portion of your ear, right? So then he just, because Dr. Scott expressed his desire to know about the box and what he was actually doing with it, so he just started thinking, right? When many people, when they think, they just start scratching their earlobe. So he also started doing that, gently to scratch the lobe of his right ear. There was a pause. So then nobody said anything. The doctor stood by the door, waiting and smiling. But the doctor was like, he was not discouraged. He was standing at the door and waiting for Klausner to reply. All right, I'll tell you if you're interested. So now if you're interested, then fine. I'll tell you about this box and what I'm doing with it. There was another pause, and the doctor could see that Klausner was having trouble about how to begin. So there was another pause, and then Klausner again paused. First he said, "Okay, fine. If you're interested, I'll tell you about it." And then he remained quiet for some time. So Dr. Scott could make out that he is finding it difficult to start, right? From where should he start, right? How should he explain the things to Dr. Scott? He was shifting from one foot to another, tugging at the lobe of his ear. So now he was tugging, he was holding the lobe of his ear, and he was like shifting from one foot to another, right? When we stand, at times we stand like this, right? We shift our weight from one leg to another. And then at last, slowly he said, "Well, it's like this. Theory is very simple, really." So then he said, "Well, I'll explain you. It's the theory on which I'm working It's a very simple theory. The human ear, you know that it can't hear everything. So as you are aware that the human ear cannot hear everything. We have a limit, right? That is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. This is the frequency which we can hear. All human beings cannot hear this frequency also, right? Varies. Okay. So the human ear, you know that it can't hear everything. There are sounds that are so low pitched and so high pitched that it can't hear them. So there are sounds which human ear cannot hear, that is ultrasonic and infrasonic sounds, so which are beyond the capacity of human ear, right? We cannot sense those sounds. We cannot hear those sounds. Yes, the doctor said. Yes, the doctor said. Yes, this much I can understand. Yes, you're right. We have a limit to the sounds which we can hear. Well, speaking very roughly, any note so high that it has more than 15,000 vibrations a second, we can't hear it. So we can't hear any note which is above 15,000 vibrations a second. Dogs have better ears than us. See, the range of animals is higher than us. Right? There are certain sounds which animals can hear, which animals can sense, and which humans cannot. Right? So that is what is he says that dogs have better ears than us. So dogs can hear higher frequencies than us. So you can buy a whistle whose note is so high pitched that you can't hear it at all, but a dog can hear it. So then he gives him an example that you can buy a whistle and the note of that whistle will be so high that the frequency uh, frequency of the sound which is produced will be so high that you humans cannot hear, but dogs can hear, right? There are whistles. Yes, I have seen once, the doctor said. So till now the doctor was able to understand everything which was said by Dosner. So he said, yes, 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 I know. I have seen that whistle. I have seen one such type of whistle. Of course you have. And up the scale, higher than the note of that whistle, there is another note, a vibration if you like. But I prefer to think of it as a note. What is a note? A note is a single tone, right? A note is a single tone with a definite pitch. Like we humans also, a single tone of human voice or a single tone made by any instrument. So that is known as a note, right? And there is a one note has a one definite pitch. Okay? There's no variation in one note. So you can say it is a small unit. Of course you have. So Klausner said, yes, I know. Of course you must have seen it. You must have seen that kind of a whistle. And up the scale, higher than the note of that whistle. And then there are sounds which are higher than the note of that whistle. There is another note, a vibration, if you like. So there is another note which is higher than the note which is produced by that whistle. So, and if you want, you can call that note a vibration also. But I prefer to call it a note. You can't hear that one either. So anything which is higher than the sound, because you cannot hear the sound of the whistle, so obviously anything which is higher than that sound you cannot hear. So you cannot hear that one either. And above that there is another rising right up the scale forever and ever and ever, an endless succession of notes. So he says that yes, there is higher, there is one more higher note, higher than that note, then there is another note which is higher than that note. So in this way there are innumerable notes and sounds which we cannot hear, an endless succession of notes. So there is endless succession of notes, infinite number of sounds and notes which we cannot hear. So high that it vibrates a, oh sorry, I missed something. An endless succession of notes, an infinity of notes. So there are infinite number of notes. Means there is no limit. You cannot count even. There are so many notes. There is a note if only our ears could hear it. So high that it vibrates a billion times. So there there is a note, but like the problem is that we cannot hear it. So why we cannot hear it? Because it is million times as high as that. So it is million times higher than what we can hear. I told you, like we can hear only up to 20,000 hertz, right? And that is also a very ideal limit. 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That is a very ideal limit. Every human ear cannot hear that limit. So, and another a million times as high as that. So there are sounds which are a million times higher than what we can hear, and on, higher and higher as far as number goes. So there are higher notes, and then higher, and then even higher, as long as you the infinity, eternity beyond the star. So there are so many. So what does this show about Klausner? The way he is talking. Can you make out something? He's so engrossed and so absorbed in telling Dr. Scott about his research and about whatever invention he is trying to do. Can't you say, just make a note of these words, higher and higher as far as number goes, which is infinity, eternity, beyond the stars. So he's talking like this. So what does this show? His obsession. Maybe the thing which started as a wish. He had a desire to hear the sounds which are beyond the capacity of human ear. But now what has it become? It has become an obsession. The way he's talking, he's at this moment, it's like an obsessed person. Klausner was becoming more animated every moment. More animated means more full of energy, full of life. So when he was telling Scott about his invention, whatever he was trying to do, so he became more energetic. Till now he was not even interested in talking to him, right? He wanted him to go, but once he asked him about what he was doing, he asked him about his work, then he became so excited and so full of energy that he went on talking about it. Please mark this. This paragraph contains the description of Klausner. Right? You need to learn it. He was a small, frail man, nervous and twitchy. Twitchy means very anxious, with always moving hands. So see, this twitchy, frail means very weak and very thin. So this twitchy behavior means that this anxiousness which he had inside him. What does this show? Again, that he was obsessed. When people are obsessed with something, when their mind is continuously occupied with something, they are very anxious and they are doing something. Right? You remember when he entered the shed, his hands were moving very quickly. He was even talking to himself while trying to fix the wires inside it. Remember? So his behavior was very twitchy, means he was very anxious with always moving hands, and his hands were moving continuously. His large head inclined towards his left shoulder, as though his neck were not quite strong enough to support it rigidly. So his head was tilted. Inclined means tilted towards his left shoulder. And it seemed that his neck is not strong enough to keep it straight, right? So his head was tilted like this. So his face was smooth and pale, almost white, and the pale gray eyes that blinked and peered. Peered means to look at something very carefully. When you look at something very carefully, so it's peering. From behind a pair of steel spectacles were bewildered, unfocused, remote. Bewildered means confused. There was a very confused expression in his eyes. So you really need to learn these words, that his eyes, which were peering means looking carefully, from the bespectacle means he wore specs. So bespectacled were there was a lot of confusion in his eyes, and his eyes were very unfocused and remote. Remote means they were like distant eyes. It seemed as if he is only physically present at that place. Again, a sign of obsession. Having remote eyes means again a sign of obsession, that he only his body was present there. He was completely absent. His mind was completely absent and completely unaware of his surroundings. It was completely occupied with that black box. Right? He was completely engrossed and absorbed in his experiment. He was a frail, nervous, twitchy little man, a moth of a man. So, a moth of a man, what does it mean? Moth, the spiritual meaning can be determination also, right? And then he was like fluttering and not able to concentrate. So this can also be one of the meanings, right? So he appeared like a moth of a man, dreamy and distracted. So he was so distracted and dreamy again, completely in his own world, oblivious of his surroundings. Suddenly fluttering and animated. Fluttering here means moving very quickly, right? And animated. Animated means full of energy and very lively. And now the doctor, looking at that strange pale face and those pale grey eyes, felt that somehow there was about this little person, a quality of distance, of immense, immeasurable distance, as though the mind were far away from where the body was. So now the doctor was looking at his pale face, at the pale face of Klausner, and he could sense that he is absence, means the mind of this person is not present here. Right? Why? Because half the things which he was talking was not making sense to Dr. Klausner. Dr. Scott. Half the things which he was saying, like he wants to hear such strange sounds which are much beyond the capacity of human ear. So all these things were not like they were not very easy for the doctor to digest and understand, right? So, and he was so so full of life and so animated when he was telling all these things, that the doctor looked at his face and he felt that this man is obsessed with sounds, is obsessed with something. His mind is completely occupied with something, only his body is present. So his mind has moved at a great distance from the place where he is actually standing, right? The doctor waited for him to go on, but the doctor stood there very quietly and listened to what he had to say, listened to what Klausner was speaking. Klausner sighed and clasped his hands tightly together. So, clasping his hand tightly together means this. So he was like so excited. You can just sense his excitement. So, together, I believe, he said, speaking more slowly now. So now he started his face came down and he said, I believe that there is a whole world of sound about us all the time and we cannot hear. It is possible that up there in those high pitched inaudible regions, inaudible means something which you cannot hear, there is a new exciting music being played with subtle harmonies and fierce grinding discords. Where subtle harmonies means harmony means pleasant sound here, right? Something which is the sounds which are pleasing to us, right? So, and fierce grinding discords means that unpleasant music, that is discord. A music so powerful that it would drive us mad if only our ears were tuned to hear the sound of it. There may be anything, for all we know there may. So he said, yes, we can only guess that there may be anything. There are so many sounds far away from us which our ears cannot hear. There might be some music being played at the present moment. There might be some unpleasant sounds being played somewhere, and we are completely oblivious of it. We are completely unaware of it. So this is, see, he was least bothered about the reaction of the doctor. He was simply going on talking about his experiment and whatever he was doing. He didn't care how the doctor was reacting. Yes, the doctor said, but it is not very probable. So the doctor said, yes, but like there are chances are very less. Whatever you are talking about, it doesn't seem to be very probable, or it doesn't seem to be very real, right, or very practical. Why not? Why not? Klausner pointed to the fly sitting on the small roll of copper wire on the workbench. See, all these obsessed people, you contradict them. If a person is obsessed with something and you try to contradict that person, the person will like get very agitated, right? And the person will get very hyper at it. So this is what Klausner also did. So the doctor said, yes, you may be right, but like it's not very probable. Means chances are not so bright. Means whatever you are saying, that is like, it doesn't seem to be very much a reality, right? Maybe whatever you are saying, but so the Klausner he was irritated. Exactly. Why not? Why not? Why? How can you say that? Klausner pointed to the fly sitting on the small roll of the copper wire of the bench. Then he pointed to the fly. There was a fly sitting on the bench. Sorry, on the workbench. There were wires lying on the workbench. Na? So he was sitting. The fly, so it was sitting on the one of the wires. The fly was sitting. You see that fly? What sort of noise is that fly making now? So Klausner pointed to that fly and he said, "You can see that fly. Can you hear the sound which the fly is making at the present moment?" None that one can hear. So you know that we cannot hear to the sound of the fly. But for all we know that the creature may be whistling like mad on a very high note. But I can say that this small creature, this fly which is sitting there, and it seems to us that it is not making any sound at the present moment. But the reality may be quite different. The reality may be that this fly may be whistling at this moment like a mad on a very high note, or barking or croaking or singing a song, or anything, any type of sound this fly may be producing. It's got a mouth, hasn't it? It's got a throat. So this fly also has a throat, this fly also has a mouth. So how can you be so sure that it's not making any sound? Maybe it's making some sound and we are not able to hear it because it is beyond our capacity. The doctor looked at the fly and he smiled. He was still standing by the door with his hand on the doorknob. Doorknob, you know, that handle which is there to open and close the door. So his hand was still on the doorknob. Well, he said, so you are going to check up on that. So the doctor was again very skeptical about it and he said, oh, so this is what you are trying to find out. Means you want to hear the sounds which this fly is making. Some time ago, Klausner said, I made a simple instrument that proved to me the existence of many odd inaudible sounds. So he said, before making this instrument or before entering into this new experiment, in the past, I made another instrument. And that instrument proved to me that there are many strange sounds which we cannot hear, many strange inaudible sounds. Often I have sat and watched the needle of my instrument recording the presence of some sound vibrations in the air. So he must have made some instrument, and the needle of that instrument, the movement of the needle in the dial of that instrument must have told him that there is some sound being produced. But because it was beyond the range of human ears, so he must have not heard that sound. But the needle told him, the needle of the instrument told him that some sound is being produced. This he's talking about the instrument which he made before this one. So that is why he was so sure about it. That in the past I made one instrument, and at times I watched, when I sat next to that instrument, I watched the needle of my instrument recording or telling me the presence of some sound vibrations in the air when I myself could hear nothing. So even when he was not able to hear anything, still the needle of his instrument moved in the past, which told him that there are some sounds in the air, some sounds are being produced near him, and he is not able to hear those. And those are the sounds I want to listen. And then, because I wanted to listen to those sounds, so I researched on it further, and now I made this instrument. I want to know where they come from and who or what is making them. So I want to know more about those sounds. I want to know the origin of those sounds. I want to know who is making those sounds. Those are strange sounds which I cannot hear. So I want to know more about them. And because I want to know more about them, that is why I'm doing all this. And that machine on the table there, the doctor said, is that going to allow you to hear these noises? And that strange looking machine which you have there on the table, do you think this machine is going to allow you to listen to all the strange sounds which you are talking about? It may, who knows? So he is not, though he is not very sure, but he is putting in all his efforts to make such a machine which will allow him to listen to these strange sounds. It may, who knows? So he says, yes, it may. It's quite possible. Who knows? So far I have had no luck. Though till now I have not been successful in listening to any such sound. But you cannot be so sure about the future that I'll not be able to, if I have not heard it till now, I'll not be able to hear it in future also. Who knows? I may hear it someday. So far I have had no luck. But I have made some changes in it. And tonight I'm ready for another trial. And tonight, but then I made some changes. Right? I tried to improve this machine. And tonight I will make another trial. Means tonight I will again test this machine after making some changes in it. This machine, he said, touching it with his hand, is designed to pick up sound vibrations that are too high pitched for reception by human ear. So he said now he was trying to explain the functioning of that machine which he had made. Right? So he said that this machine which you can see, it will pick up sound vibrations that are too high pitched for reception. Too high pitched means having a higher frequency, right? Which are too high pitched for the reception by human ear. Higher frequency which human ear cannot hear. And to convert them to the scale of audible sound. So how will this machine function? This machine will capture the higher frequencies or the sounds of higher pitch, and then it will convert those sounds into the frequency which is audible to the human ear. So this is how this machine is going to function. A scale of audible tones. Audible tones means audible to the human ear. I tune it in almost like a radio, and there are knobs, you know, the radios. Earlier we had radios, and there were frequencies. You were supposed to rotate that knob to tune into the right frequency, right? Whenever you wanted to hear some music or anything. So then almost like a radio, I have to tune it. There are knobs in that machine, and I tune it to the correct frequency. How do you mean? So now the doctor said that, oh, means the doctor didn't understand properly. And so he said, how do you mean? Means how are you going to do that? This sounds really strange. So then he again explained, and he said, Klausner again went further with his explanation about the machine, and he said, it doesn't come. No, it's not very tough. It's not a very complicated affair. Say, I wish to listen to the squeak of a bat. Suppose I want to listen to the sound of a bat. That's a fairly high-pitched sound, and it is a very high-pitched sound. The sound which is produced by a bat is high-pitched. About 30,000 vibrations a second. So the sound of a bat makes 30,000 vibrations per second. The average human ear can't quite hear it. So average human ear cannot hear that sound clearly. Now, if there were a bat flying around in this room, I tuned it to 30,000 on my machine. So if I see a bat somewhere around, moving around in my Zoom, then I will tune my machine to what frequency? 30,000 vibrations I will tune my machine. I would hear the squeaking of that bat very clearly. And then what will happen? The machine will capture those vibrations, will capture those frequency, that is the frequency of 30,000, and then it will convert that frequency into the audible frequency, right? Into the frequency which is audible to the human ear. It will convert it, and then I will be able to hear the sound of that bat clearly. I would even hear the correct note, F sharp and B flat. So these are like sound, F sharp and B flat, or whatever it might be. So or whatever, so I can hear to many different sounds, but merely at a much lower pitch. And I can hear to all these sounds at a lower pitch, means at a lower frequency. Don't you understand? So it's such simple. It is such a simple thing. It's not so complicated. Can't you hear? Means can't you understand what I am telling you? So the doctor looked at the long black coffin box, and you are going to try it tonight. Yes. So then, like, see, all the words which are uttered by the doctor, what do they show? That he is very skeptical about what this person is trying to do, right? He doesn't believe whatever he is saying. So the doctor looked at doctor looked very carefully at the black coffin box which was lying there on the workbench, and then he said, and you are going to try it tonight. So, and like, you are going to test this machine after the necessary changes which you have made today, means it tonight. So, but Clauser was very confident, and he said, yes. Well, I wish you luck. He glanced at his watch. My goodness, he said, I must fly. I must fly means I have to rush. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden the doctor will have things and he'll start flying. It means that I have to rush from here. Goodbye. And thank you for telling me. So then he looked at his watch, because after he came to know the details and the nitty gritty of the machine, he was like, he thought Clauser to be a fool, right? So because of his doubts, he showed his disinterest, and he said, okay, all the best. Whatever you are trying to do, may you be successful. Then he all of a sudden looked at his watch and he said, oh my God, I have to rush. And goodbye, and thank you for telling me about your machine, telling me about your experiment. I must call you again sometime and find out what happened. So I will give you a call again in future, and will find out what happened, means what how successful you were in your attempt. The doctor went out and closed the door behind him. So the doctor went. He left the place. For a while longer, Klausner fussed about with the wires in the black box. Then he straightened up and in a soft, excited whisper said, now we'll try again. See, this behavior, this is one of the themes of this story, obsession. Right? The protagonist of this story is so obsessed with what he is doing. Wishing for something is good. Desiring to do something is good. But like he's almost behaving like a mad person, completely obsessed. Obsession is madness. Obsession about anything is madness. See, he is even talking to himself. His anxious behavior, the movement of his fingers, and all these things. What does this show? And see, an obsessed person, it's very likely that an obsessed person will start having hallucinating things. So that theme of obsession, appearance versus reality is related to the obsession of the protagonist. Are you getting my point? See, once you are obsessed, when your mind is continuously occupied with something 24/7, then your mind will, it's very difficult for your mind to differentiate between the reality and what appears to be a reality, what you think to be a reality. Everything which our mind believes to be a reality may not be the truth, may not be the actual real thing. So this is the case with Klausner. Because he has been thinking about a particular thing, he is so obsessed with sounds I told you in the beginning, the one of the major themes of this story is appearance versus reality, right? And that inability to differentiate between appearance and reality is a result of this obsession. So for a while, Klausner fussed about with the wires in the black box. Fussed about means he was like, when you are very much absorbed and having very strong feelings about something, so then you're completely absorbed. So he was completely absorbed and trying to fix the wires in the black box. That he straightened, then he straightened up and in a soft, excited whisper. So then he straightened up. First he was bending over that black box trying to fix the wires, and then he stood straight. And after standing straight, then in a very soft and excited whisper, he said, now we'll try again. Now we'll try again. We'll take it out into the garden this time. And then perhaps the reception will be better. So if we are going to take this machine in the open, then maybe the signals and the sound waves will be received by this machine in a better manner. Lifted it up now carefully. Oh my God, it's heavy. So then he tried to lift up the machine and it was very happy. Yeah, heavy. He realized that the machine was very heavy. He carried the box to the door, found that he couldn't open the door without putting it down. Carried it back, put it on the bench, opened the door. Then first he carried the machine to the door, and then he realized that he cannot open the door with the machine while holding the machine. So he kept the machine down and opened the door, and then carried it with. So you know he was a very frail and a very weak, thin man, right? Almost white and pale. So you can imagine how much strength he must be having. So it was very difficult for him to carry the machine to the garden. He placed the box carefully on a small wooden table, then stood on the lawn. He returned to the shed and fetched a pair of earphones. So then he went back to the shed to fetch his earphones. He plugged the wire connection from the earphone into the machine and put the earphones over his ears. The movement of his hands was quick and precise. Precise means very accurate. Then very carefully he was moving his hands. He was excited and breathed loudly and quickly through his mouth. See, when you are very excited, when you are very curious about something, you start breathing very fast. So because he was, and maybe because he was like he a little while ago he was carrying such heavy machine also, so maybe that may also be one of the reasons why he was breathing loudly from his mouth. He kept on talking to himself with little words of comfort and encouragement, as though he was afraid that the machine might not work. See, there is like, you are very anxious and nervous when you put in a lot of effort into something and you are not very sure that whether that particular thing will work or not. Because earlier he when he made this machine, it didn't work properly. Then he took that machine again to his shed and tried to make some changes. So now there was a certain amount of fear also inside him. He was kind of nervous also that maybe the machine might not work. Maybe the experiment which he's trying to do, that may fail. So that fear is also there, that the machine might not work, and afraid also of what might happen if it did. And then there was a lot of like unawareness. He was completely unaware that if it works, what will happen? How will be those sounds which he'll hear? So he was anxious about both the thing. He was anxious about the success of the machine also and about the failure of the machine also. Right? If the machine failed, right, means if the machine was unable to detect the sounds which he wanted to hear, then also he'll feel bad. There was this kind of fear also inside him. Then if the machine was successful and he was able to hear those strange sounds, then he was curious and he was like nervous about them also. How will be those sounds? What will be the impact of those sounds on my ear? Whether I'll be able to hear those sounds? How will my ears react to those sounds? So see, the things which are unknown unknown to us, they always make us very curious and very nervous and very anxious. So it was like he was trying to venture into some unknown area, a place where humans have not reached till now. So he didn't have any idea about that place where he was trying to go. You try to go to some, you plan to go to some place about which you don't have any information, a place with which you are completely unacquainted. Then what will happen? You will have you'll be very anxious, a butterfly in your stomach kind of a feeling will be there. So the same was the situation of Gloucester. He stood there in the garden beside the wooden table, so pale, small, and thin that he looked like an ancient, consumptive, bespectacled child. He was such a small, or you can say such a short-heighted person that the writer has called him a child. Means he was not very tall. So consumptive means consumption is a disease of the lungs, right? So like when a child who is or a person who is suffering from this disease, he is not able to put on a lot of weight. So he appeared like a very old bespectacle. Bespectacle means person wearing specs. So consumptive means suffering from that disease of the lung child. So he appeared like an old bespectacled child who is suffering from the disease. The sun had gone down, so it was sunset. There was no wind, no sound at all. From where he stood, he could see over a low fence into the next garden. And there was a woman walking down the garden with a flower basket on his arm. So there was no wind blowing. There was, then what else? The sun had gone down, there was no wind blowing, and there was perfect silence. Means he couldn't hear any sound. Then he looked here and there, and then he found that there was a woman walking in the other garden. Means there must be a garden next to his house of some other person, his neighbor. So there was a woman walking in that garden. And what was she doing? She was holding a flower basket in her arm. And so that means that she must be plucking flowers. Then he turned to the box on the table and pressed a switch on its strand. He put the left hand on the volume control. Then he tried to adjust the volume. He first switched the box on, and then he tried to control the volume. And his right hand on the knob that moved a needle across a large central dial. And so there was a dial in the middle, at the center of that box. And so he adjusted the knob, and while he was adjusting the knob, the needle was moving in that dial. That moved the needle across a large central dial, like the wavelength dial of a radio. So, like you move the knob of a radio, and then the needle moves here and there. If you must have seen now these days, so you listen to radio on your phones. Nobody listens to radio, but those who are still fond of radio, then they use it on their phones. But earlier we had knobs, right, to adjust the bandwidth. So wavelength of the dial of a radio. The dial was marked with many numbers. So there were many numbers written on the dial in a series of bands, starting at 15,000 and going up to, what is it, 10 lakh. Yes. So we'll end here today, and tomorrow we'll read further.